sophisticated hack attacks against us on record from the big ISPs. They certainly, the Pentagon's announced they're going to attack American and European media that criticizes the New World Order. They've now said on the news they're going to start killing journalists. There's famous video of the tanks driving up and killing Reuters journalists over in Iraq. Okay, let's accelerate.
We've published the books, in fact, from the United Nations, and a whole host of umbrella organizations under the United Nations have published their own books on the future cities. I should mention that back in the 80s, I met the man who owns the polo team that Prince Charles belongs to. And he is a big Canadian. He owns hundreds of corporations and companies across the U.S. and Canada and Europe. He has an estate in Ireland, he's a lord, and an estate in London. And he's also an amateur, although professional architect. And through a strange set of circumstances, which I didn't understand at the time, he showed me his drawings for the future cities. And one of them, this is about 1982, one of them was a domed city over a much smaller Toronto, under a sort of glass type dome. And he didn't explain why it would be a dome or anything else. And I said, well, that's a much, much smaller Toronto. He says, yeah, that the population will be that small, he says, in about 30, 40 years. No explanation given. But then a person who works for the United Nations sent me a book on the future domed cities for the perfect societies across the world. And it's right along the agenda that H.G. Wells and so on talked about. Everyone will be reared in a sort of creche dome. You won't know your parents. That's exactly what the Soviet system was supposed to be based on, but it wasn't Marxist enough. They tried it in Israel when they set up Israel, by the way, where the children would be brought up communally, wouldn't know who their parents were. You'd be trained in there up to a certain age, then you'll go to a school dome, then you'll be designated a work dome, and then you'll have your adult life dome as you work, and then you would put it into a geriatric. You're all nice and organized, like a control freak had planned your whole life for you. This is the world's structured society they want to create. But this is for the ones who will be doing most of the work, for the elite.
And Alan, I'm not trying to start fights here because it's very destructive to get into fights with people that, are similar to our views on the New World Order. There was a big film made. They used a lot of my footage. And other people's footage, and it was supposedly anti-New World Order 9/11 truth. Then their next film called for the Dome Cities, and a robot will run everything, and it'll be a totally controlled society, and the maker said that I would have to be put in a re-education center, but that I couldn't intellectually understand and grasp why this had to be done. No, I understand the power trip these people are on, and I kept saying to them, I heard all this 100 years ago from the eugenicists. What you're saying is right out of the Soviet model, right out of the Fabian socialist model. This is the New World Order. And they'd say, no, it's not. And I'd say, but that's a fact. Even these drawings and diagrams aren't new. I'm not starting a fight with these filmmakers. I'm just stating a fact. And they got very, very angry and started attacking us, and then play this mental game of saying, no, this is something totally new. Alan, you know what I'm talking about, don't you? This is not totally new, is it?
Not at all. The whole 20th century was mapped out, including the wars, because people like H.G. Wells, who was a founder of the Fabian Society, who was picked up by Sir Thomas Huxley, the grandfather of the Huxley, the best friend of Charles Darwin. He picked a whole bunch of young men up. He taught them in the red tie school. They were all given red ties for revolution. They were all guaranteed to become very famous because unlimited financing would give them complete access to all media. And they were to go out there and be propagandists for this eugenics, utopian, scientifically run society.
And they did the predictive programming to set the maps of man so people would follow this predetermined system. And then they wrote books bragging they'd done this. None of this is our opinion.
That's right. And also, Wells himself said that we need a world war. And after World War I, he said not enough people have come to their knees. They've not given up national sovereignty. He said we need another world war to bring this into existence. World War II brought in the United Nations, and every country signed on to it, and that's when all sovereignty was signed away, and the whole future agenda was begun to be implemented in reality. So the whole
What will
20th
the world...
century was planned, you see, including what they have planned for this century. This is to be the century of change. Every top professor across the planet in academia has talked about the century of change for the latter part of the 20th century, talking about the 21st century. Obama's whole premise was change is good. No one asked him what he's talking about. What change are you talking about? This is their century to implement the final stages as they reduce the population. They bring through the creme de la creme, as they say. They get rid of the weak, the unfit, the mentally unstable, anyone with hereditary physical or mental problems. And that's in the book by H.G. Wells called The Modern Utopia.
But, this is what I want to bring up to you, but when you really read their literature, they sell their lower-level minions who are on little petty power trips that, oh, you're part of the elite society, we're going to cull everybody. They don't tell them that they're going to be culled as well, or that it's not just positive and negative eugenics that is taught, that, oh, we're going to get rid of the inferiors and advance the elites. The elite actually is waging war against those that are intelligent, that are bright, that they're actually, that's their main target, and that these control freaks are trying to wreck society to accelerate their master plan. So really, I mean, you can argue with their stated goal of a better world and a healthier elite, but that's evil in and of itself because of what it leads to. But really, that's only a facade as well.
Lord Bertrand Russell, another high member who helped change the outlook of many millions of people by his writings, he was one of them. He wanted to get followers to create mass movements to help the idiots bring it all to be, to come into being. He said himself, though, he said we must, through schooling, he says, check through various testing for certain people with special IQ abilities of communication who could influence the masses and recruit them. He says if we can't recruit them on our side to work for us, we must eradicate them, eliminate them. That's what he said, because they might influence the masses against this plan. In other words, kill them off. That's it. We must kill them.
And he wrote books and got Nobel Prizes and other awards for this, and it's called A Big Liberal. Just like Margaret Sanger is called a liberal, and they love to name black schools after her. I went to a predominantly black school in kindergarten in Dallas.
Yeah.
Margaret Sanger, kindergarten and first grade. And there was Margaret Sanger's statue. It's all a big sick joke, isn't it?
Margaret Sanger said that children were weeds. That's a term in her own writings, weeds. Yeah.
Well, she said blacks were weeds that had to be eradicated.
Mm-hmm. But all children, she said, all children below a certain class of income were weeds. That's what she said.
Yeah. Absolutely degenerate and disgusting. And, you know, when I'm talking to psychiatrists and psychologists that call me from, say, Psychology Today or other publications, I've talked to a few in the last year because they're real obsessed now on being on power trips. I'm not saying this particular writer, but the stories I've seen they have been where they analyze us and we're crazy and none of this exists. While it's all admitted it exists, I found that a lot of them aren't even that intelligent. They're just on kind of a power trip, and that they're so wedded to the false reality that they have to say we're wrong and something's wrong with us just out of a power trip control freak nature. They can't imagine that somebody outside their system could actually analyze how the world operates. Or they'll tell us there are no morals, but then they will try to tell us what their morals are and that we've got to follow them. They play all sorts of mind games.
It's mind games, and a lot of them, too, mind you, know darn well which way the wind is blowing, and they hope to please their masters and be some of the chosen few who come through. But again, back to Julian Huxley, he said many will work towards this thinking that they have been chosen, but they will be deemed unworthy in the end. They'll be used.
Well, that's another thing. You look at these actual elites, they are degenerate, they are inbred, like hybrid dogs that have all sorts of mental problems, health problems. In fact, interbreeding with the Pharaohs, with the British, with the French, it leads towards insanity. And I think that, you know, they're saying we're all mentally ill and they're making all normal human behavior mentally ill, except their psychopathic behavior, they're saying that's good.
That's right, and it's no doubt about it. I mean, Plato said about it all that 2,300 years ago. He said we can breed in traits or breed out traits, and for leaders we want to breed out certain emotional traits. We have psychopaths, definitely, who are intergenerational in charge of this world system, who truly believe they are the only sane people on Earth.
Yeah, I've met a lot of them.